Okay, now here's an argument that I'm not actually making because it's absolutely unacceptable, but I can hear it being made by some of the people I grew up with back on the south side of Chicago. And it's to a certain degree inspired, although my uncle doesn't know that, by John David Scritney's book, The Minority Rights Revolution. I know you know the book, and I know you know the guy.
Yeah.
He's a sociologist, political sociologist at UCSD. And the argument is, how do I know it's a civil rights question? Answer, if I can make a credible analogy to the situation of Blacks about whatever the group is, it's got a pretty good chance of clearing the hurdle to be a civil rights issue. So here's the argument that you can't make. I'm Black. You're appropriating the suffering of my ancestors and the unique characteristic of my struggle for equal citizenship in this country on behalf of postmodern, hypermodern, unchristian, I'm sorry, I'm just making the argument my uncle's going to make, stuff, like transgender stuff, and I object.
I have a fair amount of sympathy for that position.
Which I'm not actually taking, but I can imagine my uncle taking it.
Right.
No, I got some sympathy for it too. I'll confess that.
The position of African Americans in this country is unique. And unique means only one. Now, there are other forms of discrimination. But I guess what I would say, and here I agree with John Scritney, that one of the way in which public policy was made was basically to say we should get the same protections as African Americans. And therefore, all of the remedies should be the same. But the remedies shouldn't necessarily be the same because the situations are different. Racial discrimination and sex discrimination are different. That's why we allow separate but equal for sports for one, but not for the other. Racial harassment is based on prejudice and hatred and all kinds of other ugly things. Sexual harassment against women might be the result of that, but it might also be the result of attraction and desire for intimacy that is unwanted by the woman in question. So those are different situations. The same thing happened on the basis of disability. The laws initially, with especially Section 504, say you can't discriminate. But discrimination meant that you have to take into account our particular situations and mold our accommodations to our particular situation, not acting like, not treating us equally and the same regardless of race. So in all of these ways in which we have used the language of discrimination, we have overlooked key differences about the nature of the problem. And that's where I think the piggybacking on the laws that were passed to aid African Americans produce some undesirable consequences. Title IX was created to undo sex stereotypes. And a sex stereotype is assuming that a transgender person should fit our mold of male or female. So if you discriminate on the basis of transgender status, you're discriminating on the basis of an illegal sex stereotype. If that seems a little odd, it's very odd.
Has this been vetted at the Supreme Court?
It has not come to the Supreme Court. I would just point out the Supreme Court has never issued a decision on sports and Title IX. It's all lower court. The lower courts have generally been quite supportive of a broad reading of Title IX to protect transgender students. I think if this comes to the Supreme Court, the outcome will be quite different. I'll just say, parenthetically, the Supreme Court has dealt with the issue of discrimination against transgender people in employment, the Bostock decision. And the Supreme Court said that discrimination against transgender people in employment is prohibited by Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. I think that's a completely reasonable decision because under Title VII basically said, can you do this job? And if you wear a dress or don't wear a dress, wear makeup, you don't wear makeup, that doesn't determine how well you can do the job. The issue in Title IX tends to be different because it involves where do you put people when you have sex segregation that is legal? And that's a different
like bathrooms.
Bathrooms, locker rooms, and above all,
prisons, but that's not a higher education thing.
Right. But So when you have sex segregation that is legal and appropriate, then the transgender issue becomes a lot more complicated.